Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're asking a huge question. How did the world get dragged into one of the deadliest conflicts in all of human history? This is a story of how World War I got started.
Okay, let's just jump right in. How on earth does a single gunshot in a city that many people had never even heard of escalate into a 4-year global catastrophe? It's an incredible story of bad luck, tangled politics, and a series of promises that basically forced an entire continent into war.
So our story kicks off on a summer day in Sarajevo. It's the capital of Bosnia, which at the time was part of the massive Austro-Hungarian Empire. And the heir to that whole empire, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, is in town for a visit with his wife, Sophie.
I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. History really did turn on a dime here. First, there's a failed assassination attempt with a bomb. The Archduke, a little shaken but okay, decides to go visit the officers who were wounded in that attack. But then his driver takes a wrong turn and stalls the car, literally right in front of another one of the assassins, a young guy named Gavrilo Princip. It's just a fatal, world-changing coincidence. Now, you gotta understand, this was no random act of violence. This was a stone-cold political assassination. Gavrilo Princip was part of a group that was armed and backed by a secret society called the Black Hand. And their whole goal was to break these Slavic regions, like Bosnia, away from the Austro-Hungarian Empire and join them with Serbia.
So for the Austro-Hungarian Empire, this was it, the last straw. They didn't see this as just some radical kid with a gun. No, they saw it as a direct attack planned and paid for by the Serbian government. Their empire had been attacked, and someone was going to pay.
But here's the thing. The assassination, that was just the match. For decades, Europe had basically been turning itself into a giant powder keg with this ridiculously complicated network of military alliances that made a huge war pretty much inevitable. And this is where it gets really interesting, because Europe was basically split into two big teams. On one side, you had the Triple Entente, that's Britain, France, and Russia. And on the other, the Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. And these weren't just friendly handshakes. These were ironclad military pacts. An attack on one meant an attack on all. You can already see how a little spark could set the whole continent on fire. And get this, here's the truly tragic, almost absurd part of it all. The leaders of three of the most powerful countries involved, King George of Britain, Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany, and Tsar Nicholas of Russia, were all first cousins. They were all grandkids of Queen Victoria. But in the end, those family ties meant absolutely nothing compared to the powerful alliances they were locked into.
Okay, so now all the pieces are in place. And this is where things just start to unravel, one domino tipping over the next. Germany basically gives Austria-Hungary a blank check, telling them, hey, do whatever you need to do, we've got your back. Feeling confident, Austria-Hungary makes its move. And that starts a chain reaction that nobody can stop. And just look at how fast this all happens. It's insane. July 23rd, the ultimatum. Just 5 days later, war is declared. Russia, who's the protector of Serbia, starts getting its huge army ready. Germany sees that as a threat, so it declares war on Russia and then on Russia's ally, France. And then, when Germany marches through neutral Belgium to get to France, Britain declares war on Germany. Boom. In about a week, the whole continent is at war. You know, it's hard for us to imagine now, but as millions of young men marched off to war that summer, almost everyone was convinced it would be over in a few weeks. They thought it would be this quick, glorious adventure.
I mean, this quote from the German Kaiser just says it all. And that optimism was everywhere. Russian officers were actually debating whether they should pack their fancy dress uniforms for the victory parade they were sure they'd have in Berlin, or if they should just have them mailed later. Nobody, absolutely nobody, saw the 4 years of unimaginable bloodshed that was coming. So, Germany had this one big fear. Getting stuck in a war on two sides at once, fighting France in the west and Russia in the east. So, they cooked up what they thought was a genius solution, the Schlieffen Plan. It was a massive gamble. The idea was to hit France so hard and so fast that they'd be knocked out of the war immediately. And the key to that speed was to cheat a little by invading through neutral Belgium. But you know what they say about the best laid plans? This one, which looked so perfect on paper, started falling apart almost right away. The Belgians fought back way harder than anyone expected, the British showed up in France faster than planned, and by the time the Germans got close to Paris, their soldiers were exhausted, their supplies were a total mess, and, this is the crucial part, a huge 50-kilometer gap opened up between two of their armies.
The Allies saw that gap, and they just threw everything they had into it. And this led to one of the most incredible stories of the entire war, the taxis of the Marne. In this moment of sheer desperation, the military governor of Paris grabbed every taxi he could find, about 600 of them, to rush thousands of soldiers to the front line. It became this legendary symbol of France's absolute refusal to let their capital fall.
So, the Battle of the Marne, it was a huge deal. It worked for the Allies. Paris was saved, the German army was forced to pull back, and their whole dream of a quick 6-week victory was completely shattered. The war of movement was officially over. So what happens next? Well, after that initial push and pull, both armies tried to get around each other in what they called the race to the sea. But when that race ended, they just dug in. And the result was this insane, unbroken line of trenches, stretching 700 kilometers. That's all the way from the border of Switzerland to the North Sea.
And right there, that's it. That's the moment the war changed forever. And the image we all have of World War I, the trenches, the mud, the barbed wire, was born. The fast-moving campaign everyone expected had bogged down into this brutal, static, miserable war where you fought for every inch of ground. The Western Front had arrived. And when you look at it like this, the difference between what they thought would happen and what actually happened, it's just mind-blowing. They promised their soldiers a war that would last weeks. What they delivered was a war that lasted over 200 weeks. The whole home by Christmas idea didn't just fade away. It died a horrible, bloody death in the trenches of 1914. So the quick war was over, a fantasy. And that left everyone with a terrifying new question. What happens when your whole strategy is based on movement and suddenly nobody can move? What happens when victory isn't about brilliant tactics anymore, but about who can stand to lose the most men? That's the question that would haunt the world for the next 4 years. Thanks for joining us for this explainer.